I'm Elizabeth, 30, and on the way to my family reunion. I thought I was finally ready to make peace with the people who'd spent years pretending I didn't exist. I had my favorite playlist on, coffee in hand, and for once, I wasn't nervous until my phone buzzed with a message that felt like a slap. Don't bother showing up. You're banned from the house, idiot. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because the house they were celebrating in, it wasn't theirs to begin with. It belonged to me through the company they never cared to ask about. What started as a reunion ended as a reckoning. And this time, I wasn't the one being thrown out. The November wind had a strange chill that day, sharp like a warning. The sky over the neighborhood shimmered in muted gray, and the maple trees in front of my parents' house had already shed their gold. I stood by the car door for a long moment before I could bring myself to walk up the driveway, my hand gripping Liam's. He gave me that quiet smile he always did when I hesitated, the kind that made the world slow down for a heartbeat. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, though the word didn't quite make it to my lips. Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always been a performance. Not a celebration, not really. The laughter always felt too loud, the smiles too rehearsed. It was a show for the neighbors, for my mother's friends, for her illusion of perfection. The door swung open before we even knocked. My mother appeared in the doorway, her hair pinned into a stiff chignon, a gold apron tied around her waist, as if the meal behind her were a royal banquet. Her smile faltered when she saw him. "Oh," she said, her tone the kind of polite surprise that carried 1,000 quiet insults. "You didn't say you were bringing company." Liam extended a hand. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mrs. Whitaker. Thank you for having me." She didn't take it. Instead, she brushed invisible dust off her sleeve. "Well, I wish you'd told us earlier. We didn't plan for extra guests. There's barely enough food as it is." From the hallway, my father's voice boomed. "Barely enough? That's a good one, Margaret. Did you forget how she always brings home strays?" Laughter erupted from the living room. My brother's bark of amusement, my sister's low chuckle, the same notes of mockery I'd grown up with. Every sound landed like a slap. I felt Liam's hand tighten around mine, steady and warm. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let them talk." The words could have sounded weak. They didn't. They carried a calm authority, like someone who'd seen storms worse than this and had learned how to wait them out. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon glaze. Candles flickered over a table set with bone-white china and silver flatware that gleamed like it belonged in a museum. Every seat was taken except one, an uneven stool near the corner, too short for the table, the kind of seat you offered a guest you didn't want to stay long. My mother gestured toward it. "You can sit there, dear. We'll try to make the portions work." I caught my sister's smirk as she poured herself wine. "Guess she brought another nobody," she murmured. The heat rose in my chest, but before I could speak, Liam just smiled. "I'll manage," he said softly, and sat down. Dinner began with the usual performance, my father carving the turkey like he was presiding over a court, everyone talking over one another, laughter clanging like cheap glass. They asked no questions about Liam. Not where he was from, not what he did, not even how we met. It wasn't curiosity, they didn't care. To them, he was an accessory to my latest mistake. Then, in the middle of my father's story about his golf score, a deep knock sounded at the front door. The conversation stopped. When my mother opened it, the man standing outside looked like he'd walked straight out of a city hall photo. A gray overcoat, a dark suit beneath it, a small pin on his lapel bearing the city seal. Behind him were two other men, both carrying folders and name tags clipped to their jackets. "Mayor Collins," my father said, half rising from his seat in stunned confusion. "This is unexpected." The mayor smiled faintly. "Apologies for the intrusion. We were told Mr. Liam Porter might be here tonight." Every head turned toward Liam. He stood slowly, composed, his expression steady but humble. "Yes, sir. Good evening." The mayor stepped forward, extended his hand, and said clearly so every corner of that too-perfect dining room could hear. "Sir, it's an honor. Thank you for your leadership. The city owes you more than we can say." Silence swallowed the room. My mother's hand froze around the serving spoon. My father's jaw slackened. Leadership, my mother repeated, her voice small, as if the word didn't belong in her home. The mayor turned to her. You didn't know? Your daughter's fiancé is the new deputy director for economic development. The man behind the new community fund that's feeding half the city. He's been the driving force behind our largest initiative in years. The room seemed to tilt. My sister's glass stopped halfway to her lips. My father pushed his chair back and stood, uncertain whether to speak or apologize. Liam smiled politely, as though nothing unusual had happened. Mayor, please sit. You're our guest now. But the mayor shook his head. No, sir. I think you should have my seat. He gestured toward the head of the table, the chair my father had always claimed as his throne. Slowly, without a word, my father moved aside. The mayor sat in the empty stool instead, balancing his plate as though it were a privilege. The two officials followed suit, nodding respectfully at Liam. Dinner resumed, but the air had shifted entirely. Every laugh was forced, every fork trembled against porcelain. My mother's voice broke twice while offering gravy. My father avoided eye contact altogether. Liam thanked them for the meal with flawless grace, every sentence polished, but never boastful. It's good to spend the holiday in such a humble home, he said, his tone even, but his eyes sharp enough to slice through the silence. It's rare to see such modest gatherings these days. The words hung there gentle, yet precise. My parents' faces flushed with the kind of shame that no apology could soften. As dessert was served, the mayor spoke warmly about the city's new plans, how the fund would expand programs for the hungry, how Liam's initiative had already saved hundreds from eviction. My mother nodded along, though her knuckles whitened as she clutched her napkin. When the mayor and his aides finally left, the door closed behind them with a hush that felt almost sacred. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my father cleared his throat. Deputy Director, huh? His voice trembled somewhere between pride and disbelief. Liam smiled faintly. Titles don't matter. What matters is the work. He turned to me and said softly, shall we? We stood. My parents didn't stop us this time. As we reached the door, my mother called after me, her voice stripped of its practiced polish. Sweetheart, we didn't know. I paused, looking back at her. Her eyes glistened with something between regret and realization, but I didn't answer. Liam opened the door, and the night air rushed in cool, clean, untainted by the bitterness inside. As we stepped out onto the porch, the laughter behind us had vanished completely. Liam squeezed my hand once more. Sometimes, he murmured, people need to see what they chose to ignore. 3 days after Thanksgiving, the air still carried the faint chill of that awkward dinner, the kind that clings even after everyone pretends it's forgotten. I hadn't spoken to my parents since that night, though I'd received 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 short texts from my sister, and 1 awkward voicemail from my father that began with "about the other night," before cutting off mid-sentence. Liam didn't mention it. He never did. He moved through the days as if nothing had happened, meetings, calls, press briefings. But I could see it in the way he adjusted his cufflinks before stepping into his office, the quiet steel in his gaze. He'd let my family's insult slide, but he hadn't forgotten it. That Tuesday, I was in the kitchen when his phone rang. He answered with his usual calm tone, though I caught the name flashing on the screen, Mayor Collins. A few minutes later, Liam hung up, his expression unreadable. The city's hosting a fundraiser next week, he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. Collins wants you to come with me. Of course, I said, curious. Formal. Very, he replied. Then, after a pause, he also mentioned your parents received an invitation. I froze. What? Liam shrugged lightly, almost amused. Apparently, the mayor's wife insisted. Something about building community relationships. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, I realized what was happening. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a reckoning, one written in polite letters and delivered on embossed paper. The following Friday, the fundraiser unfolded inside the city's Grand Convention Hall, white marble floors, chandeliers glittering like frozen rain, and tables lined with people who measured worth by the weight of their last name. Liam looked effortlessly at home in his tailored suit, speaking with officials, shaking hands with donors, smiling when he had to. I watched him from the edge of the room, still stunned by how easily he navigated this world. The same man my family mocked over a dinner table now stood at the center of the city's elite, commanding attention without ever demanding it. When my parents arrived, I saw them before they saw me. My mother's gown shimmered beneath the lights, her expression composed but tight. My father's smile looked forced, too wide, too rehearsed. They carried the same arrogance they always had, only now it wavered beneath the surface. They spotted us by the stage. My mother hesitated, then approached with that familiar brittle grace. "Liam," she greeted, her tone unusually gentle. "We're so glad to see you again." That dinner, well, it was such a surprise. Liam turned to her with a politeness that felt sharper than any insult. "It was," he said simply, "a night to remember." Before she could respond, a voice echoed through the room, Mayor Collins, stepping onto the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor the individuals shaping our city's future." Applause rose around us. My father straightened his posture, clearly assuming this was the kind of event where names like his might finally matter again. But as the mayor continued, my mother's expression began to change. "Our deputy director for economic development has been the cornerstone of progress in our community," Collins said, motioning toward Liam. "His leadership not only revitalized struggling neighborhoods, but also created the fund that now provides food security for thousands. Tonight, we celebrate him." The applause grew louder, filling every corner of the hall. My mother's eyes widened slightly, her lips parting as if she might say something but didn't. Liam rose from his chair, calm and composed, walking toward the stage. When he reached the podium, he didn't speak immediately. He stood still, scanning the crowd, and then his gaze found my parents. His tone, when he finally spoke, was smooth but deliberate. "I grew up watching people work twice as hard just to earn half as much respect," he began. "I learned early that kindness isn't about who deserves it, it's about who needs it. And sometimes, the ones who have the most forget that simple truth." His words weren't directed at anyone specifically, yet they hung heavy in the air. The audience applauded again, unaware of the weight behind them. My parents clapped too, their faces stiff, trapped between pride and humiliation. After the speech, the mayor approached our table, smiling broadly. "You should be proud," he told my parents. "You raised quite a remarkable man." My father stammered something resembling agreement, while my mother smiled too quickly. "We've always believed in him," she lied. Liam didn't correct her. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable, his silence louder than any rebuttal. As the night stretched on, I caught fragments of whispers. People discussing Liam's projects, the donations he'd secured, the upcoming initiatives with his name attached. My mother tried to engage in conversations, mentioning me, trying to anchor herself back into relevance through association. But it didn't work. The social gravity had shifted. For once, the Whitakers weren't the center of attention. Toward the end of the evening, the mayor invited us to a private lounge for coffee. The room was quieter there, the lights softer, the air heavy with the smell of espresso and polished wood. Collins clapped Liam on the back. "I don't think I've ever seen the city this united behind one project," he said warmly. Then, turning to my parents, "You must be very proud." My mother smiled, though her eyes flickered toward me for reassurance she didn't get. "Of course," she said. "We've always supported our daughter's choices." Liam set down his cup. "That's kind of you," he said evenly. "Not everyone's family is as understanding." My father laughed nervously. "Well, we had our misunderstandings. But that's family, right?" Liam met his gaze. "Family is what you make of it." The mayor glanced between us, sensing the current under the conversation, but wisely changing the subject. Still, my father's face flushed, and my mother's hand trembled slightly around her glass. When the night ended, we said our goodbyes in the grand foyer. My parents lingered, unsure whether to shake Liam's hand or apologize for the past. He spared them the choice, offering a polite nod before guiding me toward the exit. Outside, the city lights glowed against the night sky, reflections shimmering across wet pavement. I exhaled, my heart still tight from the evening's quiet tension. "You planned this, didn't you?" I asked softly as we reached the car. He opened the door for me, smiling faintly. Let's just say, some lessons need the right audience. I glanced back toward the glass doors where my parents stood, watching us leave. My mother's perfect composure had cracked at last, replaced by something real regret, maybe, or shame. Liam started the engine. The city rolled past in streaks of gold and shadow. I thought about how quickly everything had changed, how the people who'd once dismissed him now scrambled to be near him. He reached for my hand, his voice low. They'll try to make it up to you now, he said. But don't let them rewrite the story. The morning after the fundraiser, the city paper printed Liam's photo on the front page. His speech had gone viral overnight, and by noon, local channels were replaying his words with headlines calling him the man reviving hope. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, each one suddenly so proud of me. But the message that caught my eye wasn't from an old friend, it was from my mother. Dinner tonight? Just family. Please come. Liam saw the text, glanced at me, and smiled faintly. It's time, he said. That evening, we drove back to my parents' house. The same house that had once made me feel small now looked different, smaller itself, as if stripped of the power it used to hold. The lights were on, the smell of food floating through the open windows. But the sound of laughter was gone. My mother met us at the door wearing a soft expression I'd never seen before. You came, she said quietly. Liam nodded. You invited us. Inside, the table was neatly set. Too neatly. The silver gleamed, and for the first time, there were 2 extra seats placed at the head, one beside my father's old chair. I knew what it meant before anyone spoke. My father stood from the far end of the table. His eyes had lost that familiar edge of superiority. Liam, he said, extending his hand, I owe you an apology. I judged you before I knew who you were. Liam shook it once. You judged before you looked, he corrected gently. No one spoke after that. The sound of clinking cutlery filled the silence, every word unsaid weighing heavier than the meal itself. My sister tried to start a light conversation about work, but it fell flat. My mother's eyes darted between us, searching for a way to rebuild something she'd shattered without realizing it. Halfway through dinner, my father leaned back in his chair. You've made quite a name for yourself, he said, trying to recover some of his old authority. The mayor won't stop talking about you. Liam set down his fork. The work isn't about attention, he said. It's about responsibility. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. The tone silenced the room again. Then he turned to me. Your family has deep roots here. Influence, resources. If they wanted to help the community, they could. My mother blinked. Help how? The fund's expanding, he replied. We're opening new centers on the east side. We need donors who actually care about people, not their image. For a second, I thought my father might refuse. But he didn't. He nodded slowly, shame creeping into his features. Tell us where to start. Dinner ended without jokes or mockery, just quiet sincerity. My mother brought out pie, though none of us really ate it. When we stood to leave, she followed us to the porch. I was wrong, she said, her voice unsteady. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. But I see now I was the disappointment. I didn't know what to say. Years of resentment tangled in my throat, but Liam's hand found mine, steady and warm. We all learn, he said softly. Some just take longer. We walked to the car under a calm, clear sky. The cold air carried no bitterness this time, only a strange, quiet peace. For weeks afterward, the transformation was gradual but real. My parents began volunteering at the food drives Liam organized. My sister joined one of his outreach committees. The whispers about the Whitakers' arrogance faded, replaced by stories of their unexpected humility. But the real change happened months later, when the city honored the fund's top donors. My parents sat in the audience, not at the head table, content to listen as Liam announced a new project, a permanent community center built in a struggling neighborhood. He named it the Whitaker Center for Growth. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked down, unable to speak. It wasn't forgiveness Liam had given them. It was something more powerful, redemption through responsibility. When the ceremony ended, I stood beside him as people lined up to shake his hand. He turned to me and whispered, "This isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about showing them what right actually looks like." Outside, the night air was crisp, the city lights reflecting off the glass towers that now bore traces of his work everywhere. I thought back to that Thanksgiving dinner, the laughter, the mockery, the empty stool at the corner of the table. It felt like another lifetime. In a way, it was. My parents never spoke of that night again. They didn't need to. The memory of it had done its work. It humbled them, rewired them, and left a scar that quietly reminded them of who they almost lost. Liam never gloated, never looked back with anger. He simply kept building, one project after another, turning every insult into progress. Watching him work was like watching the city breathe again, stronger, fairer, cleaner. A year later, we married in a small ceremony overlooking the skyline he helped rebuild. My parents stood beside me, quiet and sincere, finally understanding that respect isn't inherited, it's earned through how you treat those who owe you nothing. After the vows, as we walked down the steps to the street, Liam leaned close and said, "Funny how one dinner can change everything." I smiled. "No," I said, looking toward the lights stretching across the horizon. "It wasn't the dinner. It was how they handled being served their own silence." He laughed softly, the sound low and genuine. "Maybe you're right."